Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. I think Zimbabweans, we have a very good sense of humor. This cartoon was shared in my social media, and one could not help but laugh. Even those who are facing this economic reality, people in Zimbabwe, they also found it very humorous. But sometimes you feel like this is not really genuine laughter, but rather laughing at oneself. In the cartoon, the young man is asking whether the $150,000 price tag is for the fridge or is it for the chickens? A chicken costing $150,000? Exactly. One is going to remember that teachers, nurses are getting really pathetic wages. I think one has lost track what they earn, but at one time it was 50, the equivalent of 50 US dollars to 100 US dollars. But with inflation, galloping inflation, where if you're paid in local currency and the rate of exchange has been galloping from 100 local currencies to $1 US, and then to 200, 300 to a US dollar. The problem is when you've got galloping inflation like that, is that your salary is not reviewed on a daily basis. So you still get paid the equivalent of 100,000 local currency. Beginning of the year, that maybe was worth 100 US dollars. But today, because of inflation, it's gone down from 100 to 50 to 25, 15 US dollars, and so forth. So the chicken there in US dollars is worth $20 US for the sake of argument. So if you were paid 100,000 US dollars local currency, by now you find that it's not even enough to buy one chicken. That is what it means. And it makes it very difficult for business people also to continue to do business. Because with inflation running away like that, it's impossible. Professor Steve Hanke of the US has estimated that Zimbabwe's rate of inflation as of beginning of this week was now at 100%. That is a monthly one. Whereas in a developing stable country, they try to keep inflation at 2%. And if it rises above that, they are very concerned. Very concerned. And this is a year-on rate of inflation. If your monthly one is of 100%, yes, the To translate it to yearly one, you're now looking at nearly 1,000%. And Professor Hanke was saying that if Zimbabwe does not do something about it, in a few days' time, Zimbabwe would be considered to have hyperinflation. And this brings us back to the days, particularly 2008, when the country's hyperinflation peaked at 500 billion percent. It wasn't worth doing business anymore, particularly if you were to be paid in local currency. It wasn't. Because as a worker, whatever local currency you agree on at the beginning of the month, by the time you finish your work end of the month and get paid the same amount, it has lost so much value that it's not worth it. Reach the point where if you go to town to go to the bank, whatever money you had paid, say for the sake of argument, 100,000 Zimbabwe dollars in transport to go to town, you go to the bank hoping to withdraw some money. When you've got to travel back home, the price could have doubled. And so you find that if you had put one to one side, another 100,000 to get back home, you find it's not enough to take you back home. Indeed, the prices were changing so fast that if you picked up something with a price tag on it, take it to the till. By the time you get to the till, you'll be told the price has already increased. The truth of the matter is Zimbabwe's hyperinflation is not going to be contained as long as the country has gross mismanagement and corruption at the heart of it. This is really the problem. After the 2008 elections, Zimbabwe was given the opportunity to seriously address this fundamental political problem, the problem of rigged elections, the problem of bad management. No country should be stuck with a group of people as a government, which is what has happened when you rig elections. The people of Zimbabwe have been stuck with Zanu PF ever since the country's independence in 1980, 43 years. Not because people were happy with what Zanu PF was doing, but because Zanu PF rigged the elections. And you cannot change the regime. Your vote does not count for anything. This is at the heart of our problem. The country was given a golden opportunity to end the problem of rigged elections during the 2008 to 2013 government of national unity. Alas, Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends failed to implement even one meaningful democratic change in those 5 years. And so at the end of it in 2013, the country went back to elections and Zanu PF was able to rig the elections once again. And we are back where we are now today. We can pretend all we want that we can change this present system. The truth is, we cannot. And we are not going to change it. As long as Zanu PF has got these carte blanche powers to rig elections, Zanu PF will rig the elections and stay in power. The tragedy is that it's not only Zanu MDC guys who were conned into believing that they could win the elections without reforms. The people themselves, the ordinary Zimbabweans themselves, were conned into believing that. During the GNU itself, it's shocking that many Zimbabweans out there had no clue that the primary purpose of the GNU was actually to implement the democratic reforms. Even today, with the benefit of hindsight, many people still do not understand that the primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging elections. They still don't understand that. Of course, that has good repercussions. Because by failing to understand what the primary purpose of the GNU was, if you fail to appreciate that, you will also miss out on the key point that Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends sold out during the GNU. And if you fail to miss that they sold out, you will continue doing what people are doing right now. You continue to support MDC and its efforts, even if these guys are not actually doing anything of substance. Ever since the GNU debacle, MDC have given up on reforms so that we have free, fair, and credible elections. And they've started selling this nonsensical idea that they can win rigged elections by coming up with various strategies of how to win rigged elections. Of course, all those strategies are really just hot air. Since the 2018 elections, Triple C has been claiming that their number one flagship carrier strategy to win the 2023 elections would be for the party to register as many as 6 million new voters. And they made a big song and dance about it. And so soon after as soon as the voter registration started, which was in late 2008, they've been campaigning on mass voter registration that was going to be followed by mass voting, and then you protect the vote. This was Chamisa and Company's flagship strategy to win the elections. In May last year, 2022, ZEC announced that only 250,000 Zimbabweans had registered to vote in the period since the last election. 250,000. So if we go back to Triple C's own figure, that they were going to register 6 million, they'd only managed to register 4% of their target figure. 4%. In other words, the strategy, the mass voter registration, was actually dead. Forget it. It's a waste of time. That was not going to happen. But the party has not given up. It still wants to pretend that it is working. It still wants to maintain that it can still win these 2023 elections and win big. As long as the opposition and the members of the public, they participate in these elections, you are giving the ruling party Zanu PF legitimacy. That is the bottom line. And that is what matters as far as Zanu PF is concerned. Zanu PF has made it clear, or rather has been subtle about it. It has made sure that the opposition are rewarded for participating in these rigged elections. And by participating, they are giving Zanu PF legitimacy. While the party itself, the opposition party themselves, try to justify their participation by claiming they've got all these winning in rigged election strategies, in reality, they don't. I think most people, this year at least, are beginning to realize that this promise by the opposition that they will win rigged elections is just hot air. It's not going to happen. There's been a cartoon showing the opposition, or rather the opposition starting the countdown to Victory Day. We know that the countdown is actually to the day when Zanu PF will announce another landslide victory, and it will be too late for the people to condemn the election process. As long as the opposition participate in these elections in their large numbers, and as long as we, the people, the ordinary Zimbabweans, do not condemn this whole election process itself in the first place, and also condemn the opposition for selling out on democratic reforms and free and fair elections, SADC would happily grant Zanu PF political legitimacy. We cannot afford that. The country cannot afford another 5 years of this corrupt and gross mismanagement. Because as long as Zanu PF remains in power, these problems of hyperinflation are not going away. If the hyperinflation is not contained, a lot of people find it very difficult to do business. And so you'll find that there will be no goods and services available. Because how can you come up with any prices on the goods and services if you know if you're going to be paid in local currency? While it is worth something today, that local currency, tomorrow it could be worth half what it is worth today, or worse. So it will be very difficult to do business, for anybody to do business, selling services or selling goods. That is the ultimate collapse of the economy. The Zimbabwe economy shrunk by a staggering 50% during the period 2000 to 2008, when inflation, like I said, peaked at 500 billion%. The country has struggled to revive the economy. And now it looks like we are back to where we started again in 2000 2008. I think people of Zimbabwe should stop and look at the problem of bad governance, rigged elections, with the seriousness and urgency the matter demands. This solution being offered by Triple C, that they can win rigged elections with their various strategies, anybody with any eyes at all knows that these are just meaningless strategies. They're not going to work. They've never worked. We need to reject the present electoral system because it is flawed. Shocking that ZEC has failed to produce even something as basic as a registered voters roll. It's equally shocking that the opposition are participating in these elections regardless of the lack of something as basic as a registered voters roll. But the opposition themselves are participating out of greed, like I said. It is the ordinary people who are really being shortchanged because they're gaining absolutely nothing from this system that allows the opposition to participate and be rewarded while the rest of the populace, the agenda to implement reforms and hold free, fair, and credible elections is forgotten. The need for good governance is more urgent now than it has ever been before. We need people who are prepared to stand up and be counted when it really matters. Zimbabwe cannot afford another rigged election. That much is true. And so we need to seriously look into this problem of rigged elections. Until we fix it, there is nothing we can do to save the economy. The hyperinflation that we are witnessing now, even if it is contained, will be coming back again and again in the future. We can solve this problem now by demanding reforms before the elections. We can demand meaningful change to end the present failed system, or we are passing on the buck to the next generation, just as the generation before us passed it to us. We need to end this madness. Inflation, there's nothing technical about it. It can be solved. But the only way we're going to deal with inflation, just as much as most of the other economic problems, is first and foremost by implementing the democratic reforms so that we have free, fair, and credible elections. That is of paramount importance. Nothing can be achieved until we sort out our problem of bad governance. Nothing can be sorted until we sort out the problem of Zanu PF rigging elections. Yes, we can laugh at ourselves, but at the end of the day, we all know that our laughter is no more than the laughter at somebody at a funeral. You may laugh all you want, but your heart is not in it. We need change in Zimbabwe. This failed political system cannot carry on It is within our powers to change it. But if we cannot even be bothered to appreciate that the most important thing during the GNU was implementing the democratic reforms, then I believe that we are not worthy of a truly free, fair, and credible Zimbabwe. Because even if we got one in a silver platter, as long as we are so naive that we don't even appreciate the importance of free, fair, and credible elections during elections, then I think it will be by noon of the day we get the carte blanche, a democratic system, we will have lost it because we did not appreciate the importance of democracy, freedom of expression, and so forth and so on. We really need to pull up our socks as a nation. This madness cannot continue, and yet it is continuing. We will pay dearly if Zanu PF rigs the 2023 elections and get away with it. Food for thought.